Hello, friends. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you. We appreciate you tuning in because without you, we couldn't be doing this. So lots of thanks to you. Hope your day is going good. Real quick before we get into today's episode, just have a few of my world famous announcements. Don't forget, if you are a first time listener, that you hit subscribe wherever you're listening to this, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever, hit subscribe. Because when you do that, you'll get a notification every time we come out with a new episode. So every Thursday when you wake up in the morning, boom, it'll be right there on your phone waiting for you to tap and listen to. And who doesn't like simple and easy? It's like the coolest thing ever. Also, we're doing our summertime YouTube subscription campaign, I guess is what you could call it. I can't seem to find a less wordy way to say it, where when you subscribe to our YouTube channel, and the link for that's down in the show notes down below, when you subscribe to our channel, what happens is your name gets put into a random hat, and at the end of the summer, so the end of August, your name has a chance of getting picked. And if you live in the local area, you will become a guest on our show. That's right. You will be a guest on our show. You get to share your story. You get to answer questions given by me and Anthony, and people get to hear who you are and what you're about, and just really the story that you have to tell. And if you're not someone who lives in the local area, me and Pastor Anthony will send you a book of his with our signatures in the inside cover. How cool is that? Now, I don't know if those signatures are going to be worth anything, but you're getting a free book, and there's a possibility that in a few years you could sell that book at a garage sale and, try to talk someone into the fact that it's signed by two very famous people, and maybe they'll believe you and they'll pay an extra $1. I don't know. It's just an idea. So go ahead and do that. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and subscribe to wherever you're listening to this podcast right now. Also, if you haven't had a chance yet, please come check out our Sunday morning services here at Faith Presbyterian Church. Every single Sunday at 11 a.m. we have our outside services. Now, when I say please come out, I'm not begging you to come out. I'm actually saying, because you don't know what you're missing by not coming to these things. These things are so much fun. I wish... I'm 28 years old. I wish I would have known how awesome this type of church service is. There's something beautiful. There's something so just soul-filling about being outside, looking at, being under a blue sky or a cloudy sky, whatever, just being outside and hearing God's word being read and being expounded upon, and just singing God's praises with people obviously 6 feet apart from each other, but just being surrounded by community and just being a part of it. It feels like you're a part of something cool. And it's because we are. So Sunday morning here at Faith Presbyterian Church, 11 a.m., you got to come check it out. You will not be sorry. All right. So our guest today, his name is Mark Longietti. He is the state representative of the 7th District here in Pennsylvania. Now, that title is a very big title, and just like with Chris Fry a couple weeks ago, I am just intrigued to find out what led these people to have the job that they currently have. And I was not disappointed. Mark is an incredible individual. I really enjoyed his presence here, loved hearing his story, loved hearing him talk. And you guys are in for another fantastic episode of Engaged Podcast. So give it up for my friend, Mark Longietti.
This is our limited series, Leader2Leader, where we sit with community leaders and influencers. And today we have the extreme privilege of having Mark Longietti, State Representative of the 7th District, sitting here at Faith Presbyterian Church.
Well, it's great to be here, Anthony and Seth. I certainly have been to Faith before, particularly for some Boy Scout functions. And you have certainly a really nice building, and I'm sure a lovely congregation here.
Well, thank you. I love it.
Seth, now, what's going on? What's new with you today? You're looking good.
Thank you. Nothing. I was actually cutting grass whenever you called.
That's why you have that suntan.
I do. This is the tannest I've been probably since high school football.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
It's a hot day to cut grass.
I, as we were talking about with Chris Fry, I love the heat. So to me, like this summer so far has been beautiful. It's been awesome. So.
Well, my wife is, she's a sun person, loves warm weather, so she's enjoyed it. The key, though, is we don't have a swimming pool at home, but she has friends that have a swimming pool.
That's a critical move.
Yeah, so she's been able to enjoy that.
Yeah, at our house, so my next door neighbor is actually my sister-in-law, and then the house next to hers is my in-laws, and they have a pool. So we have kind of like I guess you could say, a compound between the three of our houses. So pretty much every day, I take the kids over to my in-laws' house for the swim, and then we just walk over, and it's cool. You get the benefits of having the pool, but you don't have to do all the hard work of keeping up with the pool. So it's perfect.
Genius
awesome.
move. So thinking about grass for a little bit, there are some people that are super strict with their grass. They're out cutting it all the time, and they're making sure the lines are straight. Mark, are you one of those guys?
Yeah, I don't know if the lines are straight. I am a creature of habit. I do cut my own grass. I enjoy the exercise. We have a fair-sized lawn, so it takes me a good hour and a half to cut it. And I just have my pattern that I typically follow. But this time of the year it gets frustrated because it really needs water. We need some rain, and it's starting to burn out a little bit. But as my neighbor said, grass is grass.
Grass is grass. Yeah. See, I live in a neighborhood where they're out there and it's perfectly manicured. So I feel the pressure to jump out there after. But I like to do figure eights in the lawn. Makes the neighbors kind of nervous.
Well, it's funny with COVID. I mean, typically, particularly maybe a couple weeks ago, this is my busy time of the year, May, June. We're trying to get a budget passed, and I'm really neglecting my I get the grass cut. That's about it. I don't do really anything else. Weeds are growing. Things need to be trimmed, the bushes and whatnot. This year's been completely different. As much as we've been in Harrisburg a lot, I'm home, and there's not a lot of events for me to run around to because things have been canceled. So I'm actually making my property look a little better than normal.
Very nice. All right, cool. Good. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I grew up here in the Shenango Valley in Sharpsville. My mother was a school teacher at Sharpsville, elementary teacher for 20 years. And then my father, like so many people in the area, worked at Westinghouse. He worked in what was called the powerhouse, where they generated all the energy for the facility where the boilers were located. And he worked there pretty much all of his career, 37 years. Unfortunately, died when he was 55 years old. I was in college at the time. And so he spent his career there. My brother... have an older brother, 2 years older than me. We went to college together at Westminster. We were in the same fraternity together, have many of the same friends.
That's cool.
But he moved away after college. 1983, all the mills were shutting down. Job opportunities were very scarce here. And we have an uncle on my dad's side who lived and still lives in North Carolina, and convinced my brother to move to North Carolina, and he's been there since. He's in Charlotte now.
Cool.
So I got married kind of later in life. I got married, I'm 56 now. I got married when I was 46. We're celebrating our 10th anniversary on July 31st.
Congratulations.
Thank you. My wife, Tina, just a lovely wife. She grew up just across the border in Masury, came from a working class family, just like my family, and we met years ago and got married. So a little bit too old to have kids, so we kind of missed that opportunity. But we love each other and have a wonderful relationship. So.
And your position, you have such a high demand for your time. So it's kind of like you have a bunch of kids that aren't your kids.
Right. Yeah, and that's one of the challenges is trying to balance time out. I probably haven't done as good a job as I could, and sometimes you feel guilty about neglecting your spouse because I'm out and about quite a bit. Once again, COVID's changed a lot of that, at least for the immediate term, so it's been nice to spend some time together.
You talk about your mother being a school teacher and your father working at Westinghouse, and I'm sure blue collar, hard worker. Who, when you reflect in your life, who would you say are the major influences in your life? And once you talk about that, tell us a little bit about the qualities that you saw in their life,
Sure.
that you admire, and also that you try to emulate in your own life.
Sure. So, obviously family has a huge influence on us. And certainly my mother and father certainly helped mold my character. Dad was a hard worker. I just can't remember him ever missing work. And there were times, too, where he would, I can remember one stretch where he worked like almost 200 days in a row without a day off.
Wow.
And when he came home, he worked, too. He really didn't have hobbies. He wasn't a television watcher. He didn't know much about sports. He did like to garden, but he liked to fix things. He was very mechanical. Unfortunately, I am not able to do that. And as we speak, my car's in the shop. So Dad could have fixed it if he were still around. My mother, it's interesting. My mother's still alive. She'll be 85 in October. God bless her. She's been in great health. Doesn't look her age. Doesn't act her age. She was an influence, and really more of a quiet influence when I really reflect on it, because I look back and she was always, even when the TV was on, she was correcting papers or she was doing something and really instilled. I find myself doing the same thing, really instilled that in me. My grandfather on my dad's side was a big influence on me. He came over from Italy to this country, settled in Greenville. And he was only 16 years old when he came over. He lived to 96, so he was around even after my father passed. And he was just that kind of guy. He was a simple kind of guy, gardened a lot, but he was very evangelical. And for him, his day was spent, if it wasn't gardening or doing something like that, cutting someone's grass, it was spent reading the Bible. And in a very unobtrusive way, if you sat down with him, he would eventually talk. And it wasn't offensive. It was just sharing his faith. And that really had an effect on me. And I know he prayed a lot for me. So he was a wonderful influence in my life, and certainly miss him.
What was your grandfather's name?
Nazareno.
I knew he'd have a sweet name coming over from Italy like that. My family is very similar. And that really resonates with me, because I'd watch my nun on when I'd sleep over there on occasion, and she'd always get up really early, and I'd come downstairs and I would see her sitting at the table, just no lights on, but just the light from the sun, beaming through the window, and she was sitting there reading her Bible, all the time, and it was a lifestyle for her, and it was more like a love relationship she had with Jesus. So for her to talk about Jesus with me or whoever was like talking about her husband.
Right.
And so that's funny that we have that in common. But I'm interested because when you're coming over from Italy, we see on the boat, how did he become, what's the transition that he became evangelical? Because usually that's not the case.
Yeah, it's a great question. And he didn't, he was one of those people, too. He really didn't talk about coming over and all that. He was much more forward-looking. I give him a lot of credit for that. He talked about what was going on with him now. I know that the little bit that I know is that when he started out in Greenville, he was Catholic. And they had St. Mike's Church. And there was a breakaway of Italians from that church. And the story I heard from my family was that they were hitting him up for money. And, my mother used to laugh because she said, well, the Christian Assembly Church that he helped, form, he gave them much more money than the Catholic Church ever asked for. But in talking more recently to folks, it sounded like it was more of a split of the Irish and the Italians, and who was being selected as an associate pastor, and it was supposed to be an Italian minister, and it wasn't. And so some of the Italians broke away, but they formed this Christian Assembly Church. And Farinos, in my lifetime, were pastors, very evangelical. And so, I don't know all the origins of that, but it seems like it runs through a lot of my relatives, too, that are in the Greenville area.
The faith.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Really cool. Very cool. So I do have to turn the page from personal to more professional. So you have a very big job, and at least for someone like me who's not in it, it's a very intimidating job. What led you to want to do that?
Sure. Yeah. So, I really trace it back to around middle school. I had a history teacher, Mr. Hyde. He was kind of a colorful guy, but he brought to life the figures in democracy. He told the stories that weren't in the books about George Washington and some of our founding fathers. And I was always interested in reading biographies. I don't know why I was drawn to that, but I was. But he made politics and government very interesting to me. And it's one of those things, it's like you catch the bug. And I've seen it in some other people, and you just don't lose it. You're either drawn to it or you're not. Some people are repulsed by it. But for me, I was drawn to it. And ultimately, I think because I view government as a way to help people. And so I thought that was my best way to help people. And that's what drew me to it.
Let me piggyback off of something here. So you do like to read autobiographies?
Yes.
Give the audience one or two that were the biggest inspirations for you.
Sure. Yeah, the two, and I need to read more. I don't read as much as I should. But the two most recent, they wouldn't be autobiographies, but biographies would be, I read one of the Caro books on Lyndon Johnson, and it traced his life when he went from the House to the Senate. And then John Meacham's book on Andrew Jackson, American Lion. And both, I think like everybody, these are flawed individuals. Jackson, Johnson, flawed, just like you and I. But they accomplished so much. So, Jackson really held the Union together. His own vice president was trying to destroy the Union. And then Johnson just, when you look at all the things that occurred under the Johnson administration, as flawed as he was, I was just thinking the other day, you kind of forget, Head Start. Head Start started with Lyndon Johnson's administration. So things like that, obviously the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, et cetera.
Very
so
cool.
Those two, biographies stand out to me.
There is something about biographies. It's really, like, one of my favorite biographies was on Patton. And there was something about, because I'm a history buff, but there's something about when you read a biography and you hear about not just the person's accomplishments, but also their failures and just their flaws, and that person all of a sudden goes from being like a god of history to being like someone you would personally know. And there's something, like I said, there's something special about about reading someone's life story or a biography that just really helps to like bring that person to fruition. I don't know, but that's really cool.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think that's what makes them interesting.
Yeah.
Is you don't just hear, the wonderful story of this is what they did. You hear everything about them, their flaws, their problems. Why did they act and react the way they did?
Yeah.
Like with Lyndon Johnson, one of the things that happened to him early in his childhood is that his dad took a big gamble and bought like a family farm and put all their money into it, and it failed. And as a result of that, he was shunned. Like the girl that he wanted to take to the prom, the father wouldn't let Lyndon take her to the prom because, he came from a failed family. And so that just propelled him to succeed at all costs.
Wow.
To be accepted.
I like to think about it that your heroes become human.
Right.
In that process.
Great way to put it.
That was a good one. So now that you're in this profession, what do you personally think you bring differently to the table as far as who you are in that profession?
Sure. I think part of it is a passion to serve people. And so one of my underlying passions is that people, they get disillusioned with government. And they think government doesn't care Government really doesn't want to help. They're there to serve their own interests. And so part of my passion is in my little corner of the world. I know I can't affect huge change. I want people to know that somebody cared, somebody listened, and somebody tried to help. And so I try to do that. Obviously I have staff, wonderful staff in my district office and in Harrisburg. But I also do some of the constituent work myself. And I enjoy doing that because you can get a good result and really help somebody and let them know somebody cared. Now, sometimes we don't get the result that we would desire, but in a lot of cases we can. And so that's really part of what makes me tick. The other part is I have a passion for education. Probably my mother rubbed off on me as a school teacher. I just think it can change people's lives. I think particularly early childhood education, giving kids a good start early is so impactful. And so, I just want people to have opportunity, and I think it all starts with education.
Very cool.
I remember when sitting here with Mike Muha, he mentioned education, and he referred to it as it's the tide that it comes in and everything rises because of it.
Absolutely. It's the equalizer. It really is.
Yeah.
In a country like the United States, now maybe not in some countries, you have opportunity, but in a country like the United States, you can have opportunity, and if you have that education,
I say that a lot in the videos we do weekly, not just podcasts, but we do the where I'll read a book and sort of share it, and I tell people, right now you have more opportunity than ever. There are seminars online right now that 10, 15, 20 years ago only elite people can go to, or you'd have to pay a lot of money to go to. They're recorded. They're free. Last week I listened to a 2-hour video by Jim Rohn that at one time only that group of people would be able to listen to. It's all there.
It's available.
It is available.
And opportunities like that. Like I look at my father. He had a high school education, but he was one of the smartest men that I've ever met because he read a lot and he understood physics and chemistry. He helped build our house. He did all the plumbing, all the electrical work. And even when he was at Westinghouse, he knew that plant was going to close, and he was trying to reinvent himself. He went to, at the time that we had the Shenango Valley Water Company, he went back to school to get a water treatment degree, trying to figure out where do I go from here. And so it doesn't always have to be, college was great for me, but it doesn't always have to be that. It can be other forms of education, but you have to have the foundation, the ability to read, to comprehend, and to understand, and the desire to learn.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So thinking of the world, you were in the government and you're in the service business, kind of putting it that way. In your estimation, what do you think our world needs now?
Yeah, I mean, when you boil it down, I think love. The Bible talks about that. In the end times, the love of many will grow cold, and we see that. We see people facing incredible challenges, and challenges can sometimes bring out the best and the worst in us. But we need to find a way to be able to appreciate and value each other and recognize that we always don't agree on things, but people have perspectives and they're trying to do the best that they can, and they're trying to make the right calls. And I see that on my side when we went through COVID. I mean, it's been an incredibly stressful time, and people lash out, and you can understand that because they're hurting. But I've so much valued the few conversations that I've had during this time with people who are willing to have a conversation and a dialogue. I was willing to listen to them. They were willing to listen to me. We both recognized we might not be right, but we could bounce ideas off of each other and come to a better understanding. And I think we miss too much of that. People are in their camps, and they're hardened, and they don't show maybe a compassion and an empathy to other folks.
Right. I think social media plays a role in that. You think of the old days where, like, there was the clothes hanging outside in the back, and the women were out there, and then after work, the guys would come home and the people congregated back there, and so there was natural conversations happening. And now what we do on social media is we just get in our little groups and we get our swords out and we start attacking people, right? And you lose that idea of it's not just I'm right or wrong, but maybe I should just slow down and pump the brakes a little bit and see what I can learn from the other person.
Right.
When I've done that, I have found, not always, but the large majority of the time, that other person had good intentions as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They really did. It's just I had to widen the door to gain the information to see where they're coming from. And then a lot of times you just shake hands and go, yeah, God bless you. You know,
Sure.
you're a good guy or a good gal. But allowing that process and having that attitude is critical.
I value dialogue. So my preference is face-to-face.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can't have that, my next preference is the telephone line.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm a little bit too old school. Then it goes to email. Quite honestly, social media, I mean, we use it to pump information out. I'm really not engaged in it. I have somebody in Harrisburg who says, do you want to post something on this? Or I'll tell them I want to post something, and I hand it off to them, and I really don't even look at my page to see who's saying what.
That could be good. The rule of thumb is just don't read the comments.
Yeah,
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
But if somebody calls my office, or if they send me an email, a lot of times I'll call them.
Mm-hmm.
I want to have the dialogue.
Right. Yeah.
I'm the exact same way. I'm 28, and I could tell you that I prefer face-to-face first. Then, if that can't possibly be the case, it's over the phone. Like, I have to hear tone of voice. I have to hear, because you can tell a lot about the intent of someone, how they say something, and that gets lost when you're reading a screen. And I mean, I'm sure you could probably think of some, but like, there have been plenty of instances where there was conflict that just stemmed from the fact that the other person was assuming there was a tone that wasn't actually there, because there's 1,000 ways you could read one text message.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's as a younger person, it's a huge frustration for me. And I'm finding myself getting further and further away from like the social media world, because it's just, I see it as being more destructive than good.
Right.
So you have the face-to-face, you have the phone call, then you have the email or text. Now, on my 20th year of ministry, I have my first, I started out that way, but now I just prefer the paper airplane messages underneath my door. Those are the best. All right, so we're laughing now, so let's turn a corner a little bit. Tell the audience, we're laughing, but you're probably thinking, there's truth there. All the pastor friends out there are going, yeah, he's telling the truth. Those little notes, they're always fun ones. Tell the audience what you do for fun or to relax.
Yeah. So I probably need to do more of that. Tina and I like to travel. That's another passion of mine, is if I had the time and the money, I would travel just about anywhere. Whether that's in the United States, outside of the United States, small towns, big towns. I just think my dad gave me that bug. He liked vacation. He always did vacation and took us to some wonderful places. But you just learn so much more when you're there and you see it. And I'm just fascinated. I could go to just a small town and walk around, or to a state park, or I could go to the big city. I like that too. I love culture. So that, when I have that opportunity, I like to do that. I like to, it's a little bit more of a discipline, but I like to get into the gym 3 times a week and get some exercise. I enjoy swimming pools. Both Tina and I both like that. Something that I haven't done a whole lot lately is snow skiing. I took that up when I was in law school, and me and my brother used to go on a trip a year, and it's been hard for my schedule to make that work. But that was kind of cool, because we would usually pick somewhere we hadn't been and see something new and different. And when you're on the top of a mountain and it's a blue sky day, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So Seth asked a really cool question to Chris last time about the bucket list.
Oh yeah.
Country to go.
Yeah. If you had, what's like, well, I guess I'll take this in two parts. What's a bucket list country you want to go to?
A bucket list country? Well, I want to go to Prague. I've never been to Prague.
Okay.
I know that's not a country, but it's a city. But,
Yeah.
it's just supposed to be absolutely beautiful. I would like to go to Australia and to New Zealand. I think that would be pretty cool. I'd like to, I don't think Tina's quite up for it, but in Rotary, I know years ago some of the folks went to Antarctica. I thought that would be cool and interesting.
Kind of cool to see.
Something, yeah, that hardly anybody goes to.
I was gonna say, so like the second part is what's your bucket list thing to do in that bucket list country?
It's just really just to enjoy the culture. So I want to see the historical sites. I want to eat the food. I want to talk to the people, and just get a sense of like what's it like
Yeah.
to be somebody who lives in Prague. What's it like, to be an Australian? I like to go places where, and fortunately, a lot of the world speaks English. The United States, I think sometimes we get a little, maybe this isn't the right word, but a little bit arrogant. We just think, we shouldn't learn any other language. They should know English. Fortunately, a lot of the world does know English, so you can have that dialogue.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just want to know what makes them tick, and what is the character of this place. Yeah.
One of my favorite things, 5 years ago now, we went to Germany. It was me, my brother, and my mom and my dad. And there was something so cool about going to different places, like in Frankfurt, or even going down to like the German and Austria border, and just going to like a German restaurant and just sitting down and talking to someone. And that every conversation would always start off with, like, very clearly, I was the American and they were the German, right? But then there was always a point, I want to say maybe 10 or 15 minutes into the conversation, where suddenly, like, we forgot that I was the American and he was the German. Like, we just became people. And it was kind of like, for me, it was a humbling experience, because it's like, oh, we're all really the same people. Like, we just grew up different ways and we live in different countries. To me, as much as I loved the food, that was actually my favorite part of going to Germany and seeing something else that's not just American is...
See what German beer can do?
That was always a helper.
By the beginning of the giant pint, you knew
Right.
you were American. And
That's
you were
what it
German.
was. It wasn't the
By the
time.
end of the pint, like, what country are we even in?
Exactly. We were both speaking the same language by that point.
That's good.
So you've done a lot in your life and your career. Certainly everything that you've done has not been successful.
Sure.
And that's not a criticism.
No.
It's just part of life. We can learn so much from failure. Talk to us about something that you've set out to do, failed, and the lessons that you've learned from that.
Sure. Yeah, and if I'm honest about my character, I think probably one of my faults is not taking enough risks. So I pondered that question because you sent it to me in advance, and that's always a tough question for people to answer. And it brought me to at least what I think was one of the more challenging times that I experienced. So in 2000, I had practiced law for a number of years for a small law firm in Sharon. They made me a partner, and it was the worst experience of my life because the partnership, people were not getting along, and they were fighting, and it was heading towards a dissolution. And so I jumped ship because I was always interested in politics, and I jumped ship and worked for a Congressman, Ron Klink, who was running for U.S. Senate. So I was able to latch onto his campaign down in Pittsburgh. And unfortunately, that campaign wasn't long after I got there. I realized, like, we're in deep trouble. He didn't have a good fundraising report on June 30th, and that money is the mother's milk of politics. And if you can't raise money, it's hard to compete, and it just didn't look good. And so, I guess I count that as a failure in the sense of, my idea was, okay, I'm going to latch onto this campaign. I'm going to get into the somewhat inner circle. He's going to get elected to the U.S. Senate. I'm going to work on his staff. And this is going to be my way to fulfill my desire to be in government service and help my home area. And it didn't work out. He lost. And then I came back, and the law firm had dissolved.
Oh,
That was a devastating blow.
Yeah, it really was. It was kind of like, I wasn't in financial problems because I have always been a good saver and kept my expenses low. But it was kind of like, where do you go from here?
Mm-hmm. And how were you around that time?
I was in my mid-30s. So, I had come back, and then Joe Valentino, who I had worked for, he was going to go as a solo practitioner. And I really had to think and pray about, what am I going to do here? And so what I ended up doing was I stayed in the building and set up my own shop as a solo practitioner, and we shared expenses. And that was a scary time because you don't know how that's going to work out. And now it's, instead of getting a paycheck, now I have to produce the revenue to keep things going. And God blessed it, and it did a lot better than I ever thought it was going to. But that was a very challenging time that all started with a failed campaign that I worked on.
Mm-hmm. So what would you tell a younger person, ambitious, who is facing a failure, or is ambitious and has not yet faced a failure? They're sort of on the bottom rung, climbing up.
I would say, try not to get discouraged. Perhaps do what I'm not so good at, which is don't be afraid to take risk. And to trust, if you're a person of faith like I am, to trust God that He will work things out. It may not look exactly like what we think that it's going to look like or hope for, but He will work things out, and try to be patient through that process. It's certainly, when I look at my life, there's hopefully miles to go yet, but I've been blessed. All the things have worked out for me. And sometimes they don't, but to be able to trust and to have that confidence, and to ask other people for help, which I'm not always good at either.
You walked in here earlier today, and we were just doing some small talk, and you had mentioned that you're preaching on Sunday. You laughed. I didn't laugh. It surprised me.
Yeah.
And so give Seth the gist.
Sure.
Did you start preparing for the sermon already?
I did. I have a tendency to lean on resources. So a few years ago, my pastor had asked me if I would be willing to preach on a Sunday. So I've done it a couple times. We're now in transition in my church. My pastor retired, and we don't have an interim yet. So a few of us are taking some turns. So I'm relying on a book that I just finished called The Divine Conspiracy.
Who wrote that?
Dallas Willard.
Okay.
So he was
that's a good one.
Yeah, he was a professor at UCLA for years. He died a few years ago. And in the Capitol, we have a ministry called Capitol Commission. A gentleman, Jeff Whitebread, recommended this book to me, and I read it. And so this Sunday, I'm talking about a section in the book. Part of it focuses on the Sermon on the Mount. He's really opened my eyes up to a different way of looking at some of that. And so this particular topic is on anger, contempt, and condemnation.
Okay.
And it's that section of Matthew chapter 5 where Jesus talks about, well, the law says don't kill. But I say, if you're angry at your brother, then you've really, in your heart, you may not have murdered them, but you've essentially violated the spirit of the command.
Mm-hmm.
And Willard takes an interesting approach. He talks about what this means, what this looks like in society, and how anger comes first, and then it leads to contempt, and then to condemnation, and how harmful that can be in the process of brotherhood and sisterhood, and how this isn't just like another law that Jesus says. We have the law, and Jesus says, I didn't come here to abolish the law, but we know that we can never live up to the law. And so it really is more talking about the transformation that comes through the heart, and how you become a different person, and how it's no longer the hard thing to do. It becomes the easy thing to do. And that brings me back to my grandfather, and maybe your Noni. I felt like he had that kind of relationship with Jesus. It was a living, active relationship where he was transformed and changed on a daily basis. And it became the easy thing to do for him.
Yeah.
And I've seen it in not a lot of other people, but a few other people. I've seen that in, I'll mention his name, in Joseph from Haitian Sensation. I remember, he's invited me to a couple things, and they put on a Thanksgiving dinner. And I just said to him, Joseph, thank you for doing this. You know what his answer to me was? It was effortless. And I could tell for him it was effortless, because he has that kind of relationship where he is working alongside Jesus, and it's become the easy thing to do.
Wow.
Do you think it would be a good idea to have Joseph on this show?
Oh, absolutely. He's one of the better people that I've met in this area.
I know of Haitian, what is it?
Haitian Sensation.
Haitian Sensation. And that's in downtown Sharon.
It is.
I've never been there.
Yeah, it's in that gallery plaza near the hospital, Sharon Regional. If you go in, he's all over his walls. He's got, he gives back to Haiti. He does mission trips there, but he's got the pictures and the scriptural quotes. And then the other thing he pointed out to me, he's like, do you see that over there? And it was just like a rack with all these business cards. And he says, those are businesses in the area. He said, I don't compete with them. He said, I want to support them just like, people support me.
It's cool.
Very good.
Yeah, definitely.
He's got a great heart.
We'll have to
Really
get
cool
over
guy.
there for lunch after one of these and meet him. And then
Absolutely. I was going to say that sermon is very critical for today's world, because, and I don't know if you want to call it cancel culture, but kind of like what I think Anthony was talking about it, which was with how things are now, where everyone is so hostile towards people of other ideas, or really actually just even backgrounds. I see that happening, where that hatred turns to contempt, and contempt turns to damnation. And the damnation part is, it's to me, it's everywhere. Where it's, if you have a different opinion than me, right? If you have a different viewpoint than me, then not only do I just not want to talk to you, I don't think that, like, if you have a career, it should be completely, like, you should lose your foothold. You should lose your influence. And it's just like, that's that exact same line. So when you were talking about that, I was like, you see that going on in Hollywood, you see that going on in just even local areas, which is where it's just, so that's a very timely topic to talk about.
And it really is something too that we can be introspective about too. I mean, I know it causes me to examine. I know I am guilty. I'm guilty of anger, contempt, and condemnation.
Isn't that one of the things that I feel every week, is as you're preparing for the sermon, I think it's the prophet Jeremiah that said the word started sweet and turned bitter. You get this inspiration. This is how it comes for me. And I have this thought and this word and this direction, and I get super excited. I'm all over it. By the end of the week, all the fingers are pointing back at me.
Yep.
So now I'm going to put you on the spot. If that goes well on Sunday, when I'm on a vacation, I'm going to be calling this guy up right here, kill it from the pulpit. You see, I got one in my bag. You're good to go. So,
but it does show you, and you have vast more experience than I do. But we call it preaching, but in a way, it really turns the tables on us.
Sure, if you're doing it right.
Yeah.
If you're doing it right, because you are involved in the process. One of the questions I will ask myself at some point is, okay, I'll take a step back from the sermon and say, how was this real for you? Or how is this real for you? And if I can't answer that question on my sermon notes in preparation, I know the sermon's lacking. And that doesn't mean you share 1,000 stories about yourself. It's just, where are you in here? Where are you in the process and the journey? Because one of the promises I make to the congregation is that I widen the circle enough that I'm in the circle with you. And I think that's a problem that a lot of ministers make, is they're outside of the camp, they're outside of the circle. And when you're that way, it's only condemning, because you're pointing down at people. But when you're in the circle, you're saying, I'm in this with you. Look, I struggle, just like you said, hey, look, no one's outside of this. I'm not Mr. Perfect. If you cut me, I bleed. So I like that style of ministry.
Excellent.
All right. I have a few questions that I just like to ask people
Sure.
at the end, just for fun.
Sure.
And the Coke or Pepsi? I'm kidding. That's not one of them. Where, thinking about yourself in 10 or 15 years, where do you see yourself and your wife?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a great question. And I really don't know, other than, I'm happy with the work that I do right now. I know that I will not do that forever. I know there's a time to turn the page. And whatever it is that's next, I hope that it's something where I get an opportunity to serve people and help my community. I want to be somehow involved in my local community in some fashion. It doesn't have to be elected office. So that, that's my hope, is that, I mean, I hope too that we have time to travel and see some things that we've always wanted to see and do. Like I said, I'm 56, so 15 years from now puts me in my 70s. So I hope that's a little bit of a lifestyle change in terms of not spending more time with Tina and not just pounding it all the time.
Because of this show, he's going to be out guest preaching everywhere now.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that would be a disaster for me.
Okay, now let's flip that. You have the ability to travel back in time, and you run into your old self, 10 years old. What do you say?
What do I say to myself? Hang in there, as a younger person, I was a skinny, I wouldn't necessarily say dorky kid, but I wasn't, I played a little bit of sports, but I wasn't necessarily good at that. And when you're growing up, it's tough times for kids. Just hang in there. Things will get better. Just keep being you.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Very cool.
I have thoroughly enjoyed our time together.
Oh,
I
yeah.
know that you are extremely busy, and I know that Seth and I are happy that you're here. I know the community is going to be grateful for the encouragement that you've given them. I wish you all the best.
Thank
I
you.
really do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for coming in.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, and probably the best part of the day today, and just enjoyed having a conversation with you.
Thank
The
you.
dialogue.
Thank you.
The dialogue, absolutely.
There we go.
All right.
Well, this is Seth Walters and Anthony Claditis ending our engaged podcast for our limited series, Leader to Leader, here at Faith Presbyterian Church. We look forward to sending this out. We hope it blesses you, and we look forward to connecting with you.
Well, I want to thank Mark for coming in. He was a pleasure to have, and what a great person he is. And it was an amazing episode, and I greatly enjoyed it. I also want to thank Faith Presbyterian Church for not only supporting this podcast, but allowing this podcast to even take place. Because if they would have said no to this idea, you wouldn't be hearing my voice right now. So big shout out to them. Don't forget to come out to our outside church service at 11 a.m. every single Sunday. You don't know what you're missing. I'm telling you, you gotta come check it out. It's an amazing experience. Don't forget to subscribe to this wherever you're listening to this podcast right now, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you either can have a chance to win a seat here on our show or get a free book by me and Pastor Anthony. It's a win-win. I'm telling you, it's a good investment hitting that button. All right, so that's it for me. I hope you guys have a great week. I'll check back in with you with our next episode next week. This is Seth from Engage Podcast. See you later.